you feel?
How does that make you feel,
How does
Gaylon?
that make you feel?
Makes me feel like breaking that window.
Why?
And all of a sudden, you need a pillow?
That's
You want a spare
funny.
pillow?
Sure.
There you go. Get this thing out of my way.
That's hilarious. I love it.
There you go.
Oh.
And how does that make you feel, Gaylon? Why? Start sounding like a child. Why? Why? Is it on?
I think so, right? So if it's recording, then
yeah, because the square button. Yeah, the square button would be, and you can always kind of peel that out.
How would it be like flashing that little like?
No, it'll just be doing exactly what it's doing. Okay. It would be round. That's telling you that you can stop it, and as long as the meter is continuing to move. So you tell me what it is that you want to find out about me, and I will be as self-effacing and honest as I possibly can.
Okay, well, let's see. Is this going to be like Tissue Talks episode, or is this going to be like motivational?
Whichever one you want. Whichever one you want. You decide. You're the producer here.
Oh, man.
A lot of responsibility, isn't it?
Well, here's the thing is like, I feel that you have like a lot of power, and I've shared that with you the first time that we talked. You have a lot of power in your voice and a lot of like motivation.
Okay.
And so initially coming here, I was like, you know what? Let's talk about something like that. But then as you're sitting here, I'm like, maybe it would be cool to like get to know like a layer deeper.
Okay.
About Gaylon.
Okay.
So maybe let's just see where it goes, I guess.
All right.
And then we'll find out what day it airs on. Monday or Tuesday. Tuesday tissues or Monday motivation.
So what is it that you think that you want to find out about me? And then we'll go ahead and go down that road. If you have curiosities about what either A, motivates me, or makes me different or unique in the things that you're curious about.
We'll answer that question right there.
Okay.
What motivates you?
Generally speaking, I've always been the kind of person, I guess whenever I think about what I do for a living, that I try to be as connected to the process as I can. And it's like I was talking yesterday that I was talking to my mother this morning, and so far I've been at the paper for going on February 9th will be a full year.
I'm going to sit here.
Okay. February 9th will be a full year. You can't see you.
Me.
Can't see you. There we go. There. Okay. February 9th will be a full year, and so that's 365 days outside of this being a leap year. And by the time that 365th day will have come, I will have more than 500 stories that I'll have, things that I've contributed to the paper, which is including my days off. So
the press alone.
What's that?
The press alone, or just in your whole?
Oh, just the press. Just
Wow.
That's the motivation. The motivation is making sure that the work gets done, because it's good work. It's valuable. That's what motivates me, is being valuable. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, it does. But I'm just curious where you find the value. Like, when you say valuable, what does that mean to you? Like, why is that?
Why is being valuable important? Because otherwise, why would somebody want you there? Why would somebody pay you to be someplace? Why would you move from South Mississippi to North Dakota? Then why would they extend that money, that opportunity, that sort of thing to you? I'm validating their risk in taking me on. You can be good at what you do, but they're still taking a risk. They didn't know who I was. I had no earthly clue who I was. And so you kind of want to show them, okay, this is who I am. This is why you brought me here. You brought me here for this reason. And that's why this is valid. That's why this is valuable to the community.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask a question, and we don't have to post it or whatever. But do you feel that the energy that you're bringing here is far different than what you're kind of experiencing?
Mm, initially, because I kind of worried about how people would otherwise interact and respond. Mm-hmm. I try to pay a lot of attention to numbers, and I try to pay a lot of attention to the interactive part of it. You know, there's ways that we can measure the worth, and there's ways that we can measure, what impact we have across a very broad spectrum of people. Mm-hmm. So do we only use those numbers, or do we also factor in stuff along the lines of the way people respond to us? Somebody walking up to me and saying, "Really like your column." Mm-hmm. You're a breath of fresh air. Mm-hmm. Little things that kind of pop up in people's speech, which is odd in a Midwestern community anyway, because most people in Midwestern communities don't express themselves all that much. They're not going to walk up to you and tell you you're either doing A, good, or B, bad. Mm. They very rarely, silence is acceptance, as my dad used to say, with Midwestern people. They're not going to accost you and run you down because it's rude. That's not appropriate. That's not appropriate behavior.
I didn't know that about Midwestern.
Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, and my parents were Midwestern, and mm-hmm. Self-effacing and honest enough to recognize who they were. Very waspy. If you know anything about what a wasp is, you know what that term means? Mm-mm. Okay, the term is
I'm like a wasp, like wasp, I have a nest that I need to take down.
White Anglo-Saxon Protestant is generally what that stands for. Oh. Very.
I'm so glad that you're telling me, because I'm just like, a wasp. Like.
So waspy people or wasps have a tendency to be very quiet, suffer in silence type of thing. My family, whenever we sat down to eat dinner, mm-hmm. nobody spoke at the dinner table. Yeah. Nobody spoke at the dinner table. That was unacceptable, because if you're speaking at the dinner table, food's getting cold. You need to zip it so I can eat my food. And so then when I went out into the world, and met my ex-wife, everybody's sitting there and they're having conversations while they're eating, and I'm sitting there, shoveling food in my mouth, wondering what are people doing? Don't you realize there's food to be eaten here?
So why? I'm curious about this. Like, why is there? So I have a friend too that also does, like, they weren't allowed to do that. They weren't mm-hmm. allowed to talk at the table. Whereas, like, in our culture, and it's funny how there's like different cultures, right? I mean, we are just like, we're playing games at the dinner table. It's like totally right. Night and day.
Talking about your entire day.
Oh yeah. Well, that's what went right, what went wrong, we're all together and we're connection. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, what's the reasoning behind not talking? Because I think obviously there's got to be there's a reason that it seems that is valid, right? Mm-hmm. It's its own. So it's like, what was that for?
Yeah,
what was the reason behind
it? I know that my dad was completely different from my mom, because going to my mom's parents' house, everything revolved around the kitchen. There was this little dinky table that sat in the middle of the kitchen, or on the edge of the kitchen, and people drank their coffee there. They smoked their cigarettes there. They watched television in there. The radio was on in there. And so the entire world revolved around that kitchen. Mm-hmm. And when you went to my dad's parents' house, the world revolved around the back porch and mm-hmm. being outside, or on at a picnic table or something. It was a completely different environment. And because my dad was the man of the house, that's probably the reason that it happened, was because he wasn't interested in sitting still. He was always on the back porch. His friends used to refer to him as Outback. That's exactly where he was. He was back there smoking a cigar. He was back there having a beer. He was back there watching a baseball game. And so he was the one who made the rules. And so whenever we sat down at the dinner table, it was kind of funny whenever the first time I kind of brought Melinda by, my ex-wife, and we're sitting there, and I think it was like for Thanksgiving or something like that, some sort of event, and so she's sitting there talking to my sister, and talking to my mom and stuff like that whenever we're sitting down at the dinner table. And the both of them, just because of the rules, kind of was like, what is she doing? What is she doing right now? Is she trying to speak to us at the dinner table? What, did you not give her the briefing?
Yeah.
Because I went to her house and it was like, everything was like super communal, but there was like 35 of them. And in my family, seriously, her immediate family, brothers, sisters, children, is bigger than my entire family. All of my relatives, everybody who is genetically linked to me, is less than her immediate family.
Wow.
So they had to. Otherwise, you weren't going to find anything out. But that's what they always did anyway. And nobody sat at the dinner table. That was another thing that freaked me out. Everybody's sitting in their chairs. Everybody's sitting at the bar. You know, you're eating gumbo or fried shrimp or whatever. And everybody's, you know, talking to somebody from across the room, you know, whatever. It was just a completely different thing. I was like, man, I realized people actually shot the breeze at the dinner table. This is kind of wild. How neat is this? And so it wasn't like I carried on that tradition or that style. I actually adopted hers because it was more comfortable. I can do two things at once. I can eat and shoot the breeze. Everything's going to be okay. There's a microwave right in it too, by the way. You know, I can go ahead and just reheat whatever it is I'm doing because I find out what my kids are up to, find out how their day went.
Right. Yeah.
So it was an improvement on the previous model, I guess would be the way to describe it.
Well, it makes, like, I don't know, I guess I'm curious as to what the reasoning is behind it, because I feel like I can understand both aspects. So, you know, sitting down and appreciating the food that you have and giving it the attention. It's almost like meditation, right? If you're like eating food in silence, right? You're not disconnecting from the energy that the food is giving you. Right? And you're not disconnecting from the flavor, and so I can understand and maybe while you're sitting and eating food, you're in your own thoughts too. So I can see like a very meditative aspect as to like eating together, but in silence. And then maybe after the food is eaten, then you open up for discussion or something. Like it'd be interesting to tie the two together.
Like there's a dinner agenda. Okay, initially, and step one is going to be quiet. We're going to enjoy our meat and potatoes.
Yes.
And then item 2 on the agenda is to evaluate where we were for today. So everybody gets a sheet of paper, you know, or an index card. You get an index card and you okay. Okay, this is how it works. So fair enough.
Well, I've started adopting.
Some of it's like a rationalization. I always thought that the reason that it didn't happen, if you wanted me to give you my honest opinion about why that happened,
yes,
is because my dad wasn't really good expressing his emotions, and so why unzip that fly?
Why talk?
Just keep it to yourself, type of thing. And I think that's that. It deep down inside, I think that's what the reason was.
Don't talk about the things, right? Just brush them under the rug.
Well,
not even going to that extreme, but I just recognize that sometimes.
Just don't even talk about them. Just leave them where they are.
Even
think about it that way. That's what I always thought. You know, as I've gone out into the world and met different people and experienced different personalities, I was able to figure that out.
So did you find that because maybe your guys' maybe that was just communication at like the dinner table, but how was your guys' communication outside of the dinner table? Like, were you guys able to...
Him and I?
Just
great.
Just fit your whole family.
Oh.
You know? It wasn't just like a very... You don't talk about things, even at the dinner table, especially?
There's... Again, it was one of those deals where once that door gets opened up, now all of a sudden you have other doors that are behind the door. And so it's kind of easier to not really walk through the door in the first place, as opposed to opening up the door and going there and discussing the things that might be otherwise bothering you. Because then, once that happens, you have to have a resolution, do you not? There has to be some sort of discussion that is arrived at, some level of agreement or accommodation, that kind of thing. Whereas, you know, what's what is what's what, and you just kind of leave it right there. My way or the highway type of thing. Right. Now, once I got to be an adult, it was an entirely separate matter.
Did you have to like work through that?
Mm-hmm.
Like right? Like, because it's like if you grew up in a situation where communication wasn't quite as open as it could have been, and then you enter into, say for example, you said Belinda, where it's like they're just like chatty Cathy at all,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
It's like,
but it was never like that between my mom. It's like growing up in my house was like I lived in two completely different worlds. So my relationship with my mother was 180 degrees out of phase, like from what my relationship was like with my dad. Completely separate worlds. And so when she and I were talking, it was this world. And then when he and I were talking, especially when I was a young man, we were in this world. Those worlds did not collide with each other. They didn't come together. There was no arrival in the center point. I can tell you that. But once I got to be an adult, it was much easier because I could say, I'm just not going to tolerate this. You know, my dad and I got into a disagreement one time about Elvis Presley. My father did not like Elvis Presley, and as much as my dad liked music, I couldn't rationalize that. It just didn't make sense.
And why didn't he? What was his reasoning?
He was a kind of Elvis was obviously very emotive. He was he wore makeup in the 1950s. I don't know if you've ever seen old black and white videos of Elvis Presley. He's clearly wearing eyeshadow. He's very obviously doing that. So people thought he was homosexual or whatever initially, especially when he was younger. And so young men back in the 1950s would eschew that and kind of walk away from it. Obviously, as time went by, it didn't really make that much of a difference. But I think that was initially what jaded my dad. My dad loved R&B music, absolutely loved it, which also didn't make sense because Elvis Presley was as clearly an R&B musician. He grew up around black people. That was his thing. That was his deal. And I couldn't rationalize it. I said, to be honest with you, Dad, we can't have this conversation. If you don't like Elvis Presley, there's not a whole hell of a lot of things that you and I can talk about with music. We just can't. If you want to talk about, R&B, we'll talk about all the R&B you want because he knew it, chapter and verse, up and down, from the late 1950s all the way through the late 1980s. He had it down like science. My parents were great dancers, which is one of the reasons they liked R&B music in the first place because it's great to dance to. But the Elvis Presley thing didn't make sense to me, and so I just stopped talking. I was like, there's no getting around it. I just can't talk to you about it. I can't talk to you if you don't like Elvis Presley. There's nothing you and I have to say to each other. It's over. We're done. Let's move on to baseball.
You had a very strong passion towards Elvis Presley.
Absolutely. How can you not like Elvis Presley? It doesn't make sense. There's no way you can not like Elvis Presley if you like music. It's against the rules.
Okay. Well, how about this? Okay. Because I feel the same way about Michael Jackson.
Okay.
And he's kind of going through, or he went through some interesting things, right, within the media, and who knows what is what, but like, I mean, you can't deny his music,
right?
It's like you can't not. I mean, the way that he composed the music, the way he. And so now I'm wondering if maybe you have a similar feel with Elvis Presley as I do with Michael Jackson.
Yeah, it
like
really.
People are going to say no to him, but at the same time, I mean, how can you?
If you like music, in all honesty, it's almost impossible to not like Michael Jackson if you like music to begin with. The same thing could be said about a lot of people, incidentally. Led Zeppelin.
Well, maybe that's because there's just like maybe it's. We enjoy the complexity of all of it combined, right? Like, it's not just music, but the music, yes, that's the number one thing, but it's not just about music. It's about the vision behind the music that was created that makes Michael Jackson the genius that he is.
There's some of it, and this is I've often believed this is the case. When you are in the presence of genuine talent, how can you not appreciate it? And now everything is subjective anyway. It doesn't really matter. I personally don't think that Ernest Hemingway is a very good writer. It's just my personal opinion. Everybody else thinks he's the best writer who ever existed in the world. Well, It's impossible for an opinion to be wrong. That's something that I've always told people. It's impossible. It cannot be wrong because you're the one who holds the opinion. It belongs to you, and your opinion is just as valid as my opinion is. So that's the reason for the divergence, where you just can't talk about Elvis Presley or Michael Jackson or Ernest Hemingway or whomever. You just have to agree to disagree. This person is not as good as you think they are, but that's because I think so. Now, a lot of people just think, well, why can't you just come around to my way of thinking? Why can't you figure out how right I am? It's because you're not.
That's your opinion on that, which we are all entitled to.
Exactly.
But why do we get caught up anyways? Why do we get hung up on just like leaving that table open?
Validation, I would assume.
Because they're
like, let's just say you have a difference of opinion on something, and then I just go, you know what? I don't really care what you think. That green tea is not the best green tea that I've had in my life. There's this green tea that is fantastic, and you just have to enjoy it and you have to appreciate it. If you can't, then you're invalidating me, or you're denying a part of me that I want to get across. And it's obviously just a silly example, but some people, I think, take it as a level of validation. They've been invalidated by being disagreed with for whatever reason. Let's just say that's the way they grew up. Their opinion was never valid, no matter whether they were 100% on board with the other person or vice versa. So now
it's almost like an internal battle too. Yeah.
It's hard to let yourself go. If that's, I don't know, not like a level of post-traumatic stress disorder or something like that, but certainly if there's a rhythm or a pattern that is associated with your experience that is hard, troubling for you, and then you revisit that pattern, now all of a sudden you're experiencing the trauma again, even though the other person has no earthly idea of what you went through. Kind of have to tell them, hey, just do me a favor. I was told I was wrong for pretty much my entire life. I was told that I wasn't good enough for pretty much my entire life. We're going to have to stop all that, and we're going to have to, reach a middle ground here somehow. But that's another problem for a lot of people.
Communication or what?
Communication.
Okay, I'm glad that we were on the same page there. I was like, tell me you're going that
direction. Somebody saying something directly is very hard for a lot of people. It's never been a challenge for me. That has never been a difficulty of mine. Not one day of my adult life, certainly. When I was younger, I understood what the rules were. There wasn't a whole hell of a lot of dissension that went on at 1572 Northeast 22nd Street. I can promise you that. It just didn't happen.
So then how did you kind of grow out of that, or how did you get to here where you're at now?
Well, when you're going through a situation like that, once you know what the rules are, you're faking a lot of things. I can tell you that.
Like what?
Because
do you have like something that popped into your mind as you were saying it?
You might not really enjoy a particular kind of food or a particular program that's on television, or you might not have a particular political persuasion, or you might not have the same ideas as the person who's in charge. So instead of you expressing those opinions, you just keep them to yourself, and you realize that there's no point in bringing it up because there's not going to be any reconciliation. So what's the point of bringing it up anyway? It's just going to create a problem. It's just going to create an argument. Which, going back to the point about being, waspy and stuff like that. It's a very waspy trait, especially in a, I guess, as much as I hate to use the term, patriarchal environment. There really wasn't a patriarchal environment for me, because if my mom said something, it was just as set in stone as anything my dad said. You just didn't disagree with either of them. There wasn't it wasn't a democracy. It was a benevolent dictatorship at the very best. And you just kind of understand what the rules are.
Do you think people like to be raised in that manner, or do you think at the end of the day it's like, as you grow older, you wish things would have been different? You wish.
There's really no way to tell, is there? I mean, I had come up with an idea of my own. I raised my children differently than I was raised.
Well, and that's what I'm thinking too, right? Because I'm raising my son, and I'm just like, you just want to do it right, but I think like at the end of the day, or like down the line, is it's just inevitable that you're going to be doing it wrong.
Of course, it has to be that way, because going back to the point about opinions, your son is going to have his own opinion about things whenever he grows up.
Yeah,
he's going to have his own take on things, and his opinion is going to be just as valid as yours is. And here's going to be things that you do and that you have done that he's going to say, you know what, Mom, you screwed up. He's going to be like 26 years old, and he's going to be looking at you going, you are a complete basket case about what you did in this particular case.
Right.
That was inane.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to just kind of accept it, absorb it, rationalize it, figure out, but do you really know what the answers are? Do you really know whether or not you're doing the right thing? It's like, I wasn't nearly as strict in, disciplinary matters with my children as my dad was. My daughter was, I guess, a lot like me. She realized how to not get in trouble was a very, very good trait, whereas like when I was growing up, I never caused any problems. It didn't change the nefariousness that I was involved with on a pretty much, weekly basis. I just figured out how not to get in trouble. Whereas my sister, she couldn't have gave a rat's ass if she got in trouble. She just did whatever the hell she wanted.
Yeah.
And then she would sit back and wonder, why is it that, why is it we're not getting along? That type of thing.
My siblings said that too. And like they thought that like I was just like goody two shoes in high school. And I was like, I wasn't actually. I just didn't get caught. And I knew how to work around the system. I was like, if I get good grades, then I don't have to hear it from Mom. So I'm just going to get good grades so I don't hear it from Mom. Even though it was not like it was.
There you go.
You know what I mean?
There you go. And none of this stuff was anything like bad. It wasn't like we were bank robbers or something like that.
No, of course.
We weren't heroin dealers. Just being kids.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, there was that one time, but no, I'm just kidding.
Right. So that was kind of the rules. And then later on, whenever my children got to be in their teenage years and stuff like that, did I get some feedback about my methods and my process? Of course I did. He disagreed with the way that I was raising my children. My mother she wasn't completely on board with just, if my daughter decided to dye her hair blonde on one side and then black on the other side, like Cruella de Vil. I didn't care. So, it's your hair. They don't like the tattoos or the earrings or whatever. Isn't that all left over from some previous stereotype of what a person is supposed to be like, regardless of the way that they grow up? Doesn't really matter. Doesn't really say anything about you. Unless you invest too much energy into it. So I never worried about it. And, my kids grew up relatively well adjusted, and I, got into trouble here and trouble there and stuff like that. It's all stuff that I could have gotten in trouble for. I can promise you that. Like you said, I just found ways around the rules. So, but yeah, did I get heat for it? Yeah, definitely. That baseline disagreement. How come you didn't recognize that my way was a really, really good way to do this? Because I was involved in the same goofy crap that everybody else is involved with.
Right.
Man. Yeah. It wasn't a veil. It was. I just figured out what the rules were. It wasn't that I was, like you say, goody two shoes or whatever. It was just that I figured out how to fly under the radar.
Yeah, I mean, I was still pretty like sheltered still, but I went to the after party at prom or whatever. I broke that rule. I wasn't supposed to go. I was supposed to be staying the night at my friend's house or whatever. So I feel like even when I say I did stuff, it was still not that bad.
Right. Yeah.
Until it was bad.
But yeah, whenever your son gets to be a certain age, he's going to disagree with things that he's going to disagree with your methodologies. It's bound to happen.
Do your kids say anything?
I was pretty lenient. More lenient than I grew up. I can tell you that. But neither one was really bad. There was only a couple things that ever happened where they really got upset with me. and those things were my fault, and I eventually had to either apologize or just explain myself. I had told my daughter, for example, you're not allowed to get your septum pierced until you're 18 years old, because you can go to the piercing place and do it on your own at that age because it's legal. The law says that if you want to get your septum pierced, that we have to sign a form. That's not you being yourself. That's us approving of what it is that you want to do. It's much more valid and it's much more valuable for you to be able to make that decision on your own and go down there and have it done. Well, when she was 17 and a half years old, my ex-wife decided to go ahead down and sign the form, and I caught her with the piercing in, folded up inside of her nose. I said, take it out. She went, seriously, Dad, it cost $55 for me to have this done. And I said, well, that's $55 that was poorly spent because I told you what the rules were. Because once you can make your own decisions, it's going to make you feel better to not be under my thumb. The reason you want to have your name on your electricity bill is because then you're the one responsible for all of your actions. And that's freedom. You don't want to be under my thumb. My thumb is not fun. It's occasionally oppressive. And it occasionally doesn't make any sense to you, like not being able to have your nose pierced. And so she took it out. I told her to throw it in the garbage, that kind of thing. My son was an entirely separate case. He got into a lot more trouble than my daughter ever did. That was actually kind of mild. But at the same time, part of the reason that he got into the kind of trouble he got into was because I set a poor example for him.
In his mind, you did?
Definitely. Yeah, I was directly responsible for it. Directly responsible for it. So, if I'm the one setting the poor example, in the long run, can I actually hold him accountable for it? If I'm violating the very rules that I ostensibly create for him, is it hypocrisy? I guess, to a degree, certainly. And so he definitely recoiled from that and just looked at it as a lack of fairness or whatever. But he wasn't wrong. I can say that. He wasn't wrong.
What do you mean?
There were times in my life I quit drinking for 4 years for this very reason, because I drank too much and I had a drinking problem. And I didn't drink for all that time, and it was because it made me a different person. I now, whenever I drink, I don't drink for anywhere close to the same reasons. And so I'm able to hold it together, I guess you could say. It doesn't influence my behavior. It doesn't change who I am, whereas back then it did. It's an entirely different approach, and that was my fault. That was my doing. So I was the one who had to figure it out. I was the one who had to correct it. It was my issue.
In the time that at the time when he kind of discussed that with you, did you recognize it, or did it take years later to kind of reflect back on and see what he was feeling?
I would say from his perspective, during the time he was a teenager and all this was going on, whenever we were living in Florida, he wasn't saying nothing about it because I wasn't going to tolerate it, because I was still in the same paradigm as what I grew up in, whereas I was the one who made the rules. I was the one who made the decisions. It was only after I decided to stop all of this nonsense that things started to move towards some sort of reconciliation.
And how old were they at this point?
I'd say somewhere in their late teens. All that. So my daughter has told me, she said, whenever I quit drinking and stuff like that, I apologize to him for anything that I did wrong during any time that I had kind of gone off the rails, gone off the reservation, been a prick, whatever. I apologize to him. If you were mad at me whenever I was doing that stuff, you have every right to be mad at me. That was my fault. I was the one who fucked up. You didn't. I was the one who blew it. My daughter's like, I don't think I really remember you doing anything that was kind of overboard. And then our boy was like, really? Well, man, let me go ahead and tell you a couple stories, Megan.
Yeah.
Type of things where I got directly up in his face and, let that absent-mindedness take over for whatever it was. I should have been more rational.
Was it this was the majority of their childhood then?
I wouldn't say so. It was a progressively bigger issue toward the end. Mm-hmm. And then I had to realize, oh, wow, that's why this is wrong. Oh, this is what I screwed up. And this is why I screwed it up.
Was there like a time? Like, was there something that made you drink more or not?
I was really, really grateful that I quit drinking before I lost my job at Florida Today. I can tell you that. Mm-hmm. If I wouldn't have, if I would have had that happen to me, because it was just, I'd get home and just sit and watch TV and listen to music, and just, I had a kegerator, you know. I was going through a half barrel of freaking beer a month. That's a lot of beer. And, you know, but if I would have lost my job and still have been drinking, I would have drank myself to death. There's no question about it, because I went through a very, very serious state of depression when I lost that job. Very deep.
So I'm just trying to put the timeline together. So, and I definitely want to talk about the depression thing.
Okay.
Because I'm very curious about like connecting things to
the timelines. Mm-hmm. You're talking about like 2008, well, it doesn't 2010.
Have a specific time, but I mean just like
their teenage years. They would have been 16. They would have been roughly. My daughter would have been somewhere around 17, 16 years old. My son would have been 2 years younger, which would have made him 14. So,
well, I'm curious is like, so you stopped drinking, and then you lost your job.
Oh yeah, it was like maybe 6 months or a year later.
So okay, so back to the timeline. So, mm-hmm. What encouraged you to stop drinking? When did you recognize, and how did you recognize it?
I was down in South Florida watching, and I was visiting. I was visiting my parents, and it was around Super Bowl Sunday. Mm-hmm. My ex-wife was up in the Panhandle going through a school, going to leadership school, I think, for the military or something like that. And my dad and I were up until like 2:00 in the morning drinking beer. I had to be back at work. Instead of being the smart person and calling in sick and saying I can't be up here, I decided to drive home. Mm-hmm. And the kids were in the back seat, and I must have had 3 cops, sheriffs, Florida Highway Patrol, whatever, get behind me during that trip. And I can tell you right now, without a doubt, I was not anywhere in the area code of okay to drive. Mm-hmm. Like 4 hours later or whatever, having to get back up to Brevard County. Mm-hmm. No way. I got home, white knuckle rode my way the entire trip back. And I said, I got home, got the kids off to school, they jumped on the bus. I was getting ready to get a shower. And I just went, this has to stop. This cannot continue. Mm-hmm. Because that could have gone pear-shaped in an absolute hurry. And so I quit right that moment.
Wow.
And I didn't go back. I didn't have another drink for more than 4 years, I would say. Mm-hmm. Somewhere in that neighborhood.
Wow.
But that was why. That was the reasoning. Mm-hmm. Because I recognized just how badly that could have gone. Mm-hmm. Lose your job. Get divorced. living in a studio apartment, paying child support, that type of thing. Not having a driver's license, not being able to get out from underneath your own bad decisions and the poor behavior that you participated in because you didn't ever think that anything was going to go wrong. Mm-hmm. So I stopped it before something went wrong. And that's precisely how it went.
Wow. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a gift, like having like kind of the opportunity to see your life flash before your eyes, mm-hmm. and change the outcome of.
Oh, I sat on the sofa in the house, and the kids got off to school, and I just went, and I just kind of was thinking to myself, going, mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't have that happen again. That's insane. That really could have gone poorly, mm-hmm. in a whole bunch of ways. Because I can promise you, if any of those highway patrolmen or sheriff's deputies or whatever would have pulled me over, it would have been right. It would have been done. It just would have been, you're out of here. You had 4 hours worth of time to, go to sleep and then wake up, and a couple cups of coffee wasn't going to cut it. That's for damn sure. Mm-hmm. And that was my fault. That was what I did wrong. But then that was added or compounded by, added to me thinking about, oh man, I really was a complete asshole on this particular occasion. It's almost like
it took like the sobriety to kind of reflect on.
There was a genuine moment of clarity. Alcoholics talk about the moment of clarity all the time, and I went through a moment of clarity where all of a sudden all the tumblers kind of fell into place, and it's wow, oh, I did this wrong, I did that wrong. It's kind of like smoking cigarettes. If you stop smoking cigarettes within about 5 days, 10 days, all of a sudden you can smell cigarettes on other people like that. Whereas otherwise, if you're smoking cigarettes, you're kind of nose blind to it. You can't smell what it smells like. Same thing is true for bad behavior. It's very, very similar, and it's just as noxious, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. And that's exactly what happened, at least for me. I can say that.
Wow. That's very cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, no problem. I recognize the problem whenever I went through it, and that's why I apologize for it. Because I owed them an apology. Ex-wife, children, occasionally friends, if something went kind of sideways or whatever. Yeah, man, I really screwed that one up, didn't I? You have to be self-effacing and honest enough to recognize what a hammerhead you're being, where you can't always see, until that veil's lifted, I guess, to a degree.
I heard something the other day that was super interesting about alcohol. And alcohol, if you like break down what it means like soul leaving or soul sucking or something like that. Like alcohol in a different language, and I can't remember which one, but it literally means like your soul is being taken out of your body, and what the hangover is your soul not being in your body, because the soul does not want to be living in the poison.
Right.
So it like leaves your body, and then
right.
But what's really
but that also is dependent upon what you're using the alcohol for.
Right. Oh, which
it has almost everything to do with it.
And thank you, because like a thought popped into my mind, and then it like left, and then you brought it back again, and hopefully it still stays there. because it's interesting. So as long as you're getting to the root, okay, so say for example, makeup, right? We most of the time, women, we will wear makeup to feel beautiful. But what we should be already feeling is beautiful without the makeup, and the makeup is just
an enhancement,
an accessory to go on top of it. But it shouldn't be something that is make or break in your spirit.
Right.
Like it's like, and so when it comes to so it's like, now you're saying you're drinking with a different intention. Like it's like, you can drink now, but it's different than the way you were drinking before. Because
absolutely.
Now you have like kind of healed the root of what drinking was, what drinking's purpose was for you then. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And so now
definitely. Because back then it just didn't stop. I can tell you that. I didn't stop. It wasn't stopping until I was asleep. Now if I have a few drinks in the middle of the afternoon or something like that, and I'm watching a soccer game or football game or whatever, football game's over, switch over to green tea and turn on a movie or something. It's an entirely different process, an entirely different methodology. But I can say that. And the same thing is true for food or something like that. People use food for this exact shopping,
all of it, right?
Yep.
It's like,
it's not just drugs and alcohol. I can tell you that much.
No, it's a lot of the little things that we don't really recognize, that we all kind of are masking, that's being masked. So it's just about like knowing yourself enough, being connected to yourself enough to recognize what's the masking. And food's a big one too. Like you were saying, it could be food even. Like
I can tell you one of the other reasons that I drank is because I have a very hard time keeping my mind still, being still and not budging, just shutting everything out and just being here right now and stuff like that. Everything just spirals all the time. It never really stops. I can tell you that even today, it never really stops. And certainly at that time, the only thing that really would slow it down, even remotely, was alcohol. Right? I just had to learn to understand it. I had to learn to not manage it, just accept it, accept why it is my brain does what it does.
I think that's okay too, though, that you have acceptance that is just the way that you are, and that's just the way that you function. Because for a while, like, and you know this about me, I'm just like, go, 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 go all the time, right? And everyone would be like, they're saying, like, I need to slow down, or I need to take a break, or I need to, and
no, that's who you are.
It's just who I am.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, no. And then when I need a break, I take one. My breaks don't need to happen as often. I don't know why. It's just,
I'm like that with food. I don't like to eat. I don't really derive a lot of joy from eating. It doesn't enhance my life at all. My dad and I were very similar. In that respect. That if I could have a superpower, and I didn't have to eat anything for the rest of my life, I would love that. That would be not flying, not super strength. If I never had to eat another bite of food, I would be completely happy.
Is it like a waste of time or what? You gotta sit here in silence.
It costs money. It takes a while to eat, and so on and so forth. It doesn't really do anything for me, and I just don't have any fascination with it. Whereas some people, that's a salve. That's a salve or it's something that they genuinely enjoy. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I know people who are, gastro professionals, and that's what they do. They like to find a new place to eat lunch, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Nope.
Not a dang thing wrong with it.
Nope.
I'm just disinterested in it. It doesn't enhance my life in any way. For them, it's something they're very passionate about. But at the same time, for other people, it's something that becomes all-consuming, pun intended. And it creates health problems, and it creates, distance, a gulf between them and their spouse, or their boyfriend, or their,
right,
like your girlfriend or husband, whatever. It doesn't really matter. And they don't care whether or not that person's dissatisfied with what's going on here. And it's almost exactly the same thing as alcohol will become for certain people, or pornography, or whatever distraction you have in your life. You can let it consume you if you want. It's up to you, though. You can choose to not do that.
Right. Okay.
It's an option.
Well, here's something too that I've been, and I think I was sharing with you with this before, is like, where people are saying you can't do it all. You can't do it all. I'm like, why can't I do it if it's inside of me is telling me I can? But I can't do it. It's almost like, why is it that my gut is saying I can, but the world is saying I can't? And so I had to like sit with that for a long time, and it made me realize. And then you're talking about all of these, right? Like pornography and blah blah blah, and like food and all this, and it's like, I think what it is that it seems like you can't do it because your energy is not being placed in the places that are going to allow you to have the can-do spirit. Because where are we wasting our energy, which everything is energy. Food takes energy to digest. So if you overeat, you're wasting energy on processing that food that didn't need to be digested. Your body didn't need that. So there's a waste of energy. So if you start eating better, then you can use that energy in other places. You have more energy to do other things. If you aren't all caught up in pornography or
abject laziness
shows or whatever it may be, and nothing's wrong with that, right? Everybody has their own thing, but right, like if I want to do something, then I have to know where my energy is being placed so that I can do all the things that I want to do, so I can do it instead of I can't do it.
And so you kind of wonder too, from your side of things, why would somebody have the temerity or the gall to say that to you, that you can't do it all? Was it something they observed? Was it something that they saw in your behavior that was indicating that you couldn't do it all?
Well, or probably see. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Or was it something that they're just saying? Maybe they feel like, oh my gosh, you're doing all of this stuff. I'm not doing jack shit. So now I feel responsible to do more because of all the things that you're doing, so they can keep up.
So a projection in some type of way.
Sure, could be. I mean, that's a possibility. Well, that's one of the reasons you kind of have to ask people, okay, what do you mean by that? Right. I really want to get to the bottom of it. I'm not challenging you. I'm not saying that you're incorrect. I just kind of want to know what your impression is of me, and just talk about it. And it's not going to hurt anything.
Yeah.
Not unless the person is, all caught up in their own behavior or whatever.
Well, it's just interesting I was just kind of sitting with it, right? Because it's like, man, I don't see, like, maybe they're right. Maybe everybody is right. But then I started to think about people who people who break records.
Right.
It was always, the records were always meant, or were always placed, and then everybody thinks you can't beat that. You can't beat that until somebody beats it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, maybe we can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
We
it's
just
like
have
the first question you asked me whenever I said that, what motivates you, what drives you,
mm-hmm.
just the actual work, you know, and mm-hmm. the level, the feeling of accomplishment. Mm-hmm. I get a certain sense of accomplishment out of doing the things that I do. Mm-hmm. You know, mm-hmm. there's things that
you're kind of like, go ahead.
I'm not prideful over my job, mm-hmm. but I'm certainly proud of it. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a big difference between those two mm-hmm. dynamics, those two thought processes.
Well, kind of like, so David Goggins, you've heard of him, I'm sure. Mm-mm. Oh, really? Okay, so he's this, like, his mission in life is to see what he's capable of.
Okay.
And it's like, when you have that kind of drive within you, like, right? It's like you're just trying to see what you're made of.
Right. Sure.
And that's like part of what motivates you to.
Yeah. Can it be done? Yes or no? And mm-hmm. just go and see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's like that's the only reason. That's the only reason I've ever decided to be in a play, to see if I could do it. Mm-hmm. You know, I went and auditioned for a play because I was mm-hmm. curious whether or not I could do it, because I enjoyed drama when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. I never did anything with it from the time I was 17 until I was 37. You know, 20 years transpired, and so I went and did it, and I loved it. I had a great time.
Question then. So you have all of this motivation, you have a strong mindset. How do you feel like you fell into a depression?
Because 100% of my validation in life came from, I never, when I became a journalist, I was 29 years old, 28 years old. Mm-hmm. I'd never really had a career up until then. You know, my children were both, you know, almost 10 years old by the time I became a journalist, and I just did my own thing and just had a job here, a job there. When I became a journalist, I had a career. Mm-hmm. I was Gaylon Parker. That was the first time I really felt like Gaylon Parker, his own man. Mm-hmm. And then they took it from me, mm-hmm. even though I didn't deserve it. I did nothing to deserve that, and it hurt.
Why did they? What happened?
Cutbacks. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a degree. You know, I just knew how to write. Mm-hmm. So I was one of the first ones who went, mm-hmm. and I was working 4 different jobs for that newspaper whenever I lost that job.
Whoa.
I was doing 4 different things for Florida Today whenever they let me go. I told everybody, they're going to get rid of me. I can promise you. Watch. And everybody was like, "You're full of crap. There's no way they're getting rid of you, Gaylon. No chance." Mm-hmm. I could read the handwriting on the walls. Mm-hmm. And that's all I was. At that point in my life, that's all I was a journalist. I don't even know if I was as much a father as I was a journalist. I don't think I was as much of a husband as I was a journalist. I can tell you that. Mm. So when that got taken from me, I didn't know what to do. I had no recourse.
It was almost like an identity.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was your identity.
Definitely.
Stripped from you. So then how did you navigate through recognizing that you're so much more than just that?
When I figured out that I could do anything I wanted without requiring that validation, mm-hmm. I went ahead and tried to do it, because that's all I'd done for, I don't know, 12 years, I would say, by that time. In my late 40s. No, late 30s, I would say. So I was like closing in on 40 years old. Mm-hmm. The other thing was that when I decided to quit drinking, and Melinda was up in the Panhandle, and she was going to school, she had made the decision to divorce me while she was up there. Upon returning home, in the meantime, I had quit drinking, and I told her what my intentions were, and I told her what I was going to do. She changed her mind about getting a divorce, because I think her impressions were, this is something I've wanted this whole time. I've wanted him to quit drinking for years and years and years, pretty much the entire time we've been together. Why would I leave myself out of that if that's going to be beneficial to me when this is something I've always wanted. Mm-hmm. So she decided to stay with me. We still ended up getting divorced, clearly, but we get along. We get along very well. I was on the phone with her yesterday. You know, we disagree and we argue and all that kind of stuff, just like any couple does. There's a lot of history there, and we have children together. Mm-hmm. That's clearly going to be the case. It's always going to be the case. Mm-hmm. But she made the decision at the time that she didn't want to go through with her original plans. And so there was some of that pertained to why I was as depressed as I was, because that's all I was. I was a journalist more than I was anything else in the entire world. Mm-hmm. You know, be it a husband or a father or anything. Mm-hmm. So once that got stripped from me, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any. My feet weren't underneath me.
How did you find yourself again?
Just trying to do something else. There was no
like a different job, or
yeah. I ended up getting a job working for like a temporary company or something like that. I reached a point where, you know, I had never been out of work my entire life. I started working when I was 15 years old. I lied to get my first job type of thing. So I'd never, ever, you know, been out of work.
I remember when I like my first bartending gig. My first bartending gig, I like lied on that resume that I had worked at it, right? Because it's like they're not going to hire somebody who's never been a bartender before. No. So I was just like, oh yeah, I've totally, I totally do this. And they're
slinging
like,
well, drinks.
Yeah.
Been slinging drinks since I was 21 years old.
You know, it was in California, and there's like it's competitive there. So they're like, name 8 tequila brands, or no, I think it was like 5. It was something just like so. And I never drink really, mm-hmm. So I was like, Jose, Patron. Wow, I'm really not sure why I'm spacing on the names right now. I must be so nervous.
Did you get the job?
I did.
But wow, there you go.
No, I did not. No, I think they clearly knew. They clearly knew I did not know what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I went and got a job for a temporary company, and then I was working for, I think I was working for Walmart at the time, or working for the company in Walmart, doing some work they had there, and they had told us at the outset that Walmart was looking for 2 or 3 employees out of that crew once they saw what we were capable of. Mm-hmm. And so I was just like, oh, well, I can do this. I'll rise to the top of this nonsense. Mm-hmm. You know, another challenge. And so I was one of the people they hired whenever the crew got done. It was a temporary job for like 3 weeks. We were completely reorganizing the store. Everything was getting moved into a completely different location all the way across the store. Mm-hmm. Lifts and jacks and reorganization and templates and being able to follow, you know, the puzzle and all that kind of thing. And so they ended up hiring me. I was like, cool, I can do something different. I'm not just a journalist. Mm-hmm. That was pretty much it. Mm-hmm. That was the long and short of it. And then I ended up going back to journalism anyway. So because it's something that I love doing. You know, and then my ex-wife and I ended up splitting up, and then I moved down to. I was in the meantime going to school to learn how to be. I decided to go ahead and get a job doing air conditioning work and educate myself in air conditioning, because I figured, well, if I'm living in Florida, what's the easiest way to stay employed in Florida? Work for an AC company. Yeah. You know, because everybody needs AC in Florida. Period. End of story. It's not even an argument. So I ended up getting a, air conditioning certification. Got a job working down by my parents, and whenever the opportunity came up to go back into journalism, I jumped right at it, because I hit a point where my boss was having to cut me by like 10 hours extra a week. I was only getting like 30 hours, 28 hours, and I couldn't afford to live on that, you know. So I went back to journalism because I found out Hometown News was hiring. I was okay, I'm back. I'm back, baby.
Yeah, yeah. It's a big passion of yours. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So strip away journalism, strip away all of the jobs and all of that. Who are you?
Well, the nice thing is that when your name is Gaylon, you tend to take on a very individual sort of personality. And the things that I try to be, earnest and hardworking and stuff like that. I'm a Christian. I will be the first person to tell anybody that. And I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ. And I believe in hard work. Mm-hmm. And I'm the kind of person who can do anything. I don't think there's anything I cannot do. So it's always fun to see. It's always fun to see, what's out there, what exists. Mm-hmm. But I can say that being Gaylon Parker is the best job in the entire world. And that's the honest to goodness truth. Mm-hmm. I can't think of anybody I'd rather be. Mm-hmm. Not rich, not famous, not nothing. I love being Gaylon Parker. Mm-hmm. That's the honest to goodness truth. And I feel bad for people who can't be themselves. Not in a condescending way. I feel bad for people who don't have the same approach to life as that. And I wish I could tell them how it's done. I just can't. It's only going to make sense to you if you come to that rationalization or realization. Mm-hmm. On your own. Mm-hmm. You really have to figure it out.
So how did you figure it out?
If I gave you an answer, I'm not even sure it would be right. There was 1,000 little things, 1,000 experiences, a lot of life, a lot of errors, success, mistakes, attempts, pure happenstance. I mean, pure happenstance. Like it was a complete accident how I became a journalist in the first place. So I had to recognize the role that
Are
fate.
Are there accidents though?
I don't necessarily believe that there are. I'm a pretty firm believer in fate. Mm-hmm. I think you're in the right place at the right time for a very good reason. Mm-hmm. The old saying that luck is the nexus of preparation and opportunity is very accurate. And so it does require some level of chance. Yes. But is it divinely inspired, or is it set into motion by harmonics or goodness or karma or things like that? Probably. On some level, yeah. But good things happen to bad people too. So you can't necessarily always say that's what the nature in the argument is. It's not all just decency or because you're supposed to be in this place at that particular time or something along those lines. I can't say that, but I do believe it plays a role. I believe fate plays a major role in people's lives. I don't think people accept it. I think people want to say, I did this all on my own or whatever, some sort of prideful type of thing. No, you kind of were in the right place at the right time, my friend, and there's a reason you were there because you wanted to be there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whenever you get a chance to do something different or take a risk, I've always told people that my life has never been any fun without risk. I'd never, ever, not one day of my life has been fun without taking a chance on something. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's times where you just kind of go through the motions and things like that, and that's all well and good. We can do that. Mm-hmm. If you are hardworking and stuff like that, you can go through all that kind of thing. But why shouldn't you take a risk? Why shouldn't you do something unique, different?
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's what makes you happy to be Gaylon?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
You figured that out.
Yep. Yeah. It wasn't something that anybody taught me. I didn't get instructed to do this. Mm-hmm. It took a lot, like I was saying, 1,000 little things, 1,000 little experiences, all sorts of, effort, and really genuine good fortune. Some of it is just out and out abject luck. No other way I can describe it. I wish I could. I wish I could say that it was a some kind of grand scheme or design or something. I just got really super lucky quite a few times in my life for no good reason.
I don't know. I'm thinking about, you driving back with the kids in the car and the cops behind you multiple times, and just thinking like, all they needed was a reason that told them to flip on the lights.
Sure.
Why not just pull this guy over?
Sure. They wouldn't have to give me a single solitary reason, to be honest with you.
No, they just had to. Something just had to tell them, well, let's throw on the lights.
Yep.
But something told them not to, so they didn't. And so maybe, and that was your awakening for a layer in your life that needed to peel off, I guess.
Right. Oh, I'm not going to sit back and make the claim that I haven't had difficulties with alcohol since then. I mean, we overindulge from time to time, and that's a fact. But it's
the awareness is there, right?
But you can see it coming. You can see the handwriting on the wall, and then you go, okay, all right. Now I'm starting to feel like we're getting into this zone again, and the only reason that I know that is because I've already been there and I've already been through it, and so it's kind of like, your amygdala in your brain, your fight or flight mechanism. You learn things emotionally a lot easier than you learn things verbally. And so there's a way you can train your brain to learn things emotionally, and you have a much stronger tie to them. If you can learn how to do that, it really will help you remember some of those lessons easier.
I heard this the other day that when you are going through a lesson or a hard time, and you find the gratitude, you find the lesson, you find the reason why the appreciation for having to go through it, then it tricks your brain. I can't remember what part of your brain, into not repeating it again. Yeah, like the more that you can find the appreciation of the bad things that are happening, then you're able to learn.
That's one of the reasons, in looking back and talking about how suppressive people, certainly in my generation and definitely from my background, are with emotion and all that kind of thing. You realize that if you can connect something to emotion and learn that lesson and really have it solidified in your brain, then why would you stifle your emotions? Why would you withhold them? If anything, it's going to be so much more valuable to you to actually connect to it. And so so some of that stuff becomes kind of counterintuitive, and you can't unwind it. You can only do it better tomorrow. Let's just say that this didn't work for 35 years of your life, and then you start doing something different and it starts working. Well, that doesn't make the previous 34 years bad. It just means that you had to fail a lot at whatever it was that you were going to do, like the old argument about the light bulb, Thomas Edison. No, I learned 1,575 ways to not make an incandescent light bulb. That's what all that failure meant. This is all the ways that you don't do it, and this is the way you do it, type of thing. But that's true for emotions as well. And once I figured that out and was able to connect lessons and connect knowledge and connect some of that information to feelings, that certainly helped. And it made the lesson a lot easier, and made the adjustment certainly much more simple.
Yeah, and that's I think really important, because I used to just tuck away a lot of the emotions, and I just did not recognize that that the patterns were going to repeat, because I wasn't actually understanding myself.
Right.
So I was going to end up in the same situations over and over again, because I wasn't allowing myself to feel and observe what's happening within myself.
Yeah, you have to be in the center of it.
You have to feel them. You can't numb them. You can't just pretend that they don't exist. You have to.
Yep.
It's kind of like anxiety, right? Like that's just
There are certain things in life that I really don't experience that other people experience. Like I don't really experience anxiety very much. I feel there's times where I realize just how much stuff I've got to do in a given day, and then I just go, okay, I can't go back to sleep. And I guess that is a level of anxiety. But what my brain immediately starts doing once I recognize that difficulty, once I recognize that problem, is okay. How am I going to resolve this? What is it I'm going to have to do to get this under control? Because if I don't start someplace, and if I don't start working on it, figure out what it is that I've got to do first, then I'm going to be adrift.
So are you saying like you're like if you ever feel a little bit of anxiety, it's about like maybe a to-do list that needs to be or just too much on the plate that you almost like need to find a solution, a to-do list, like a follow through plan, so to relieve it.
Yeah, it's like so it's like this past Monday, I came into work and I usually will do a little bit of work on Sunday for my column. Just to give you an example, I did not one syllable did I write. I went into work and I swear to you, between bowling results and there was like 6 stories. I think I want to say that there was like 7 or 8 different things I did when I got to work. And because I'm selfish, I like to be out of the office by about 1, and I like to be back here, get my feet underneath me, do some interviews, that kind of thing. And it's because I'm selfish. And I like my time. I'm very protective over my time. I don't care about money. I could not care less about anything more than time. Time matters above all things to me. I don't like having it wasted. I don't like people abusing my time because that's the only thing that we have equal. Some people are smarter than me. Some people have a lot more money than me. Some people have more talent than I do. Some people have whatever, bigger families, more options, more opportunities. Nobody has more time than me. We all have the same amount of time.
But also, it's interesting. Like time in your line of work is kind of anxiety driven in some type of way because you have deadlines that have to be met, or at least they used to be.
Oh yeah,
those deadlines. So it's like the way that you view time is going to be so different than somebody else views time too, because of just the nature of your of what the majority of your hours in a week are.
I had one of my best mentors, a guy by the name of Daryl Pear, and he is he was the owner of the Cloudcroft paper up in down in New Mexico, and that was the way he decided between if he had 2 people of equal talent, equal education, equal capacity, who were applying for a job as a journalist. If one of them worked in the restaurant industry, that's how he decided. Was because if you work in the restaurant industry, you have to deal with customer service, timeliness, customer satisfaction, be outgoing, friendly. That some of your money is derived from that. That's how he decided. And but yeah, it's making good use of your time was his basic argument. Being able to deal with the deadlines, being able to deal with demands. That type of thing. So yeah, I think there's a lot to that.
Well, it's interesting because like having Cade, having a child who doesn't know what time is, because they just function off of the way that they're like from the moment they're born, right? They don't have breakfast time, lunch time, dinner time. We kind of integrate that into their life, and they learn what that is. But really, they don't have any idea of time, and so for a while, I was just kind of observing Cade when he was born. I kind of wanted to see, because I was stay at home, so I didn't have this I was able to kind of learn at his go at his pace a little bit, learn what time looked like for him. And I would find myself I would find him staring at the grass. And for us it's like grass is grass. Cool. But as I was just watching him, and I would see, oh, he's not just looking at the grass, he's looking at the dewdrops on the grass. And then he's looking within the dewdrops of the grass, and he's looking at the dirt. And when it's like, when you really just slow down your time, and you can take in so much more, and you can really see.
Did it allow you to revisit to a degree your own childhood?
It not really. Not really. What it did do is it just kind of showed me a different perspective of time, because I like to, like, say for example, if I'm bartending or something, right? I don't like to waste time while I'm bartending. So if it's busy, if it's really busy, and it's like you get through, make sure everybody gets their drinks in at their table, or whatever it may be. So I'm trying to utilize every second that I have in the most productive manner. And then to shift that, and then come home to a child and respect the way they view time, as they're not in a working atmosphere or environment.
Right.
So it's just interesting. But then yeah. So then it makes me think about, it just makes me wonder about time a lot. And because time can create a lot of anxiety. I feel that way. Like, I feel like it creates anxiety for me, because I have to respond to a text, or I have to respond to an email, or I have to respond to this and that. And then that starts to pile up in my head, like, oh my gosh, this hasn't been done yet. And then it makes me feel rushed. And then it makes me disconnect from the present. And then, but it's like, children need present parents. So it's this big juggle of trying to understand time in a different context.
Or not letting it necessarily dominate your, not necessarily letting it dominate your experience. I think to a degree, where you're kind of like, where it becomes the only thing you're focused on, the only thing you've got to resolve, the only thing you have to situate is time. And really being able to maybe embrace those moments and that ability to. It's like, I have a thing about movies. There's certain movies that I like to watch over and over and over again. And then I've been around people who, once you've seen a movie once, that's it. And my dad was very much like that. Like, he couldn't understand how I remembered lines from movies. He could not in a million years understand how I remembered the lyrics to so many songs, things like that, because he was much more inclined to just watch something and be done with it, listen to it, enjoy it, move on to something else. Whereas these were things that actually kind of mattered to me. These were things that I really appreciate. And so why wouldn't I do them over and over again? I've read the James Bond books like 4 times, all of them. I know what's in them. I know how they go. I know what the end is. It doesn't change my enjoyment. Likewise with movies. I know how the movie ends. I know exactly what's going to happen here. I'm still laughing at the same stuff because I still find it funny.
Yeah.
I enjoy being in those moments because those moments are so much fun for me. And I can remember what it was like the first time like I was telling you, I might have told you, I was driving down the road one day and some song came on, and I was able to actually kind of remember why I liked that song, or what I was doing the first time I heard it, and things like that. That's the kind of stuff I get into. That's the stuff that gets me happy, and that's the reason I focus on it. That's the reason I embrace it, because I can remember just how much satisfaction I got out of it when it first happened. That type of thing.
Well, it kind of makes me think about how maybe we don't need too much, and we can just enjoy what is enough.
Yeah.
Like, my son's the same way. He watches, he's only seen like 5 movies. He's 3 now. He's only seen like 5 movies because he just only wants to watch the same ones over and over again. And we'll throw in a new one just to see if he bites, and he's like, no, I want to watch Cars, or no, I want to watch Good Dinosaur. And it's like, okay, he knows what he likes, and he gets the enjoyment out of those things. And there's more connection. I don't know. Like, maybe there's something to be said about that, is what I'm getting at. Is that, like, you're finding the joy that you need in a few things, rather than needing to find it. Maybe it's like connecting back to connecting back to like the numbness or addiction of like alcohol or food.
Yeah, so maybe there's times where it can, I'm sure, be it a form of escapism.
Just curious.
Yeah, there can be a form of escapism. You know, you're still not necessarily completely cognizant of where you are at that time. You're separating yourself from it to a degree, but it does give you that level of enjoyment and that level of satisfaction to where you kind of really don't care. I know how much time I'm wasting watching the same movie 17 times. If I want to watch The Godfather, I know for a fact I'm watching The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2. That's going to happen. So I have to hole out 6 hours of my day.
Yeah.
Because I know precisely how it's going to go. And I know what my limitations are. Now, am I wasting my time watching The Godfather for the 75th time and The Godfather Part 2 for the 75th time? Yes or no? No, I'm not wasting my time at all because I like it that much.
Yeah.
But for somebody else be like, dude, seriously, you're watching The Godfather again? Is that honestly what you're doing? Didn't you watch that back in May? How many times do you want to watch a stupid movie?
Well, I mean, like, what about Titanic? That's like, I could watch that movie every year, 3 times a year. I don't know. I love Titanic.
I've never seen Titanic. Really? Not once. And it's not for any reason. I just have never gotten around to it. It's just never happened. I don't know why. As many movies as I've seen, but I've heard it's a fantastic movie. I've just never watched it.
I don't even think it is a fantastic. Well, I mean, it is. It is and it isn't.
I was watching a show the other day. I think I was watching a show called Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and Andy Samberg's in there. And I think there's a line in that show where the person can't stand the movie Titanic, and they look at them and why do you hate Titanic so much? And they're like, there was room on that board for more than her. That's why.
Yeah, right, exactly. This is a big debate.
There was more room on that board than just for Kate Winslet. I can tell you that right now. Damn it. Which is a funny approach.
Right, I know. Yep.
But then the whole movie, the whole movie
could lay like this, and then she could lay like this, and they would have both been able to. It's just like, it's a big thing. That's why even when I bring it up, I'm like, oh boy, what are people gonna say?
It's such a, and that's another thing. I like things that are funny. You know, I like having a completely different perspective on life than other people. I like to look at things in an oblique fashion.
Yeah.
There's not just one answer for all this kind of stuff.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because then as I was thinking about what I just said about maybe there's something to be said about, not watching the same, like watching multiple things and being done with it and not coming back to it. And I'm like, oh, maybe I'm thinking too far into it. Maybe it's just whatever,
Right.
But at the same time, I always like to find connections, right? Like I'm interested in the connections and the timeline and the meaning behind actions and all of that stuff. So,
well, whenever you're in a line of thinking or a line of work or the passion that you're trying to go after, it's human. First of all, it's based around the idea of things being in a harmony to a degree. And so trying to figure out why those connections exist or how those connections are built is half of the fun, at least for your side of things, from what I can tell, because you like the idea of people being connected. You like the idea of coming together and learning something new or finding something out. I'm sure that you're perfectly capable of walking away from it if you think it's idiotic, and you're probably not going to say anything, and you're probably not going to be mean about it. But if you think something just doesn't make any sense, you're probably just going to go, not interested, move on to something else. It's the same kind of thing that you're going to do with your entertainment or the things that make you happy. No, this didn't work for me. Move on to something else. Go back to the thing that worked, type of deal. And then sometimes you find something new or different, and it feeds you, makes you want to experience something else.
Yeah.
There's no wrong answer, I would say, and that's going back to the whole point about these are the rules. you're going to follow the rules the way that they've been laid out and delineated, and this is the way it's going to go. Do you understand? Your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to do what I say. Once you recognize what those rules are, that's great. That's fine. You can navigate and function within that paradigm or that dynamic all day long. But then all of a sudden, when you go and you meet somebody else who actually does talk at the dinner table, who actually does, not sit and in silence. Now all of a sudden, it feeds you, because you're like, wow, I really actually like this better.
I love that. Thank you for wrapping that around, and I appreciate you sparking a light in my mind about a friend who asked me just the other day, do you really want me to just be myself? Like everything, even if our opinions are different? And I was like, of course, you be 100% who you are. And no matter what that is, I'm still going to love you. And if we don't share the same opinions, I was like, your pool of knowledge and the way that you see things is important to hear.
Right.
That shouldn't change the way that I feel. That's not going to change how I feel about you, or what our that's not what this friendship is based off of. We want that. I want to see your perspective. I want to understand you, regardless if it matches with the way that my mind is. I want to you are your own unique person, and that's what I love about that.
Right.
You don't have to be me. You don't have to be her. You just have to be you.
Right.
And that's
and what if her way works better?
And great. Thank you for enlightening me. You know what I mean?
What if her way works better?
My job.
Nice. That's
right.
Great.
Exactly. It's my job to understand your point of view, and maybe yours might change mine, or maybe I might still stay with what my mind says. But that doesn't mean that you should hold back. You.
Right.
You need to be.
No, I agree with your point.
And so then it makes me think about you and how much you are just happy to be Gaylon, because it's I feel like you live in that place where it's you just get to shine in the way that Gaylon gets to shine, and the rest of the world gets to experience somebody in their truest form. And by your light shining, you get to help other people get closer to theirs.
Yeah, I will tell people. I will tell people, as long as I live, that if I'm incorrect about something, if I'm wrong about something, even if it's an opinion, even if my opinion is poorly formed or whatever, if I didn't do all of my due diligence and really figure out what I thought I was talking about, I'll be the first person to apologize for it, not the last one. I'm not that person. I don't get me wrong. Friends of mine love it when I'm wrong about something. I have friends who, when they're in the presence of me not knowing an answer to something or me being incorrect, they revel in it and they really enjoy it, because it's so rare for them to see it happen. I mean, I find it funny. It's a pretty routine thing. But at the same time, I can appreciate that, because it's high praise and it's a responsibility. And it's something that everybody should take seriously. You should take your own reputation very seriously. And you should be very focused on who you are as a person. And not be prideful of it, but be proud of it, but also earn it. There's only one person who can be you. And you know what? At the same time, you can be that person. You have to earn it. You have to deserve it. And I'm a firm believer in that notion as well. And I think that's one of the reasons that I enjoy it so much, is because it's so satisfying to me. It really builds me, but it's such a big responsibility to be yourself. It really is. I don't know people, folks who take themselves too seriously are a problem to a degree, because they start thinking they're better than other people. But people who take themselves seriously to the degree of knowing that they're responsible for certain things. It's like any relationship that you're in, you play a really important role in that relationship. You don't realize it. It takes you a while to figure out what your role is in that relationship. Sometimes it's very minor. Sometimes it's very major. Sometimes it's, you know full well that anybody could be there and everybody would be perfectly happy. Mm-hmm. But once you figure out what that role is, it's really important it's very important to embrace it. Mm-hmm. And always be there and always be present. And that's half the battle, mm-hmm. is being there. No matter what role it is you're playing, be there. Be there and be serious about what you're doing there. And people appreciate it. Folks appreciate somebody who is just there. You know, there's plenty of people out there. There's plenty of people out there who don't say a word. You ever meet people who are not very verbose? I'm very verbose. I have a lot of friends who don't barely say 2 words. Mm-hmm. When they do, it's either going to make me laugh or it's going to make me think.
Uh-huh. Yes, yes.
So they play a major role in my relationship with them because I'm looking forward to hearing or seeing or whatever those things that are going to take place. Mm-hmm. Because I know they're coming. I don't know when. They're on the way.
That is good stuff right there.
But it's on the way. It's just got to be patient. It's coming. Mm-hmm.
So we all play, yeah, and that's why we have to be ourselves, mm-hmm. to the fullest, mm-hmm. because like we need to have pride in our in ourselves and the role that we play, mm-hmm. with the people around us and as a whole.
Yeah, I can promise you, no matter who you are, you're important to somebody, and it's crucial that you understand how important you are, because somebody else feels exactly like that. So, be honest with yourself. Take it seriously.
Gaylon, I love this.
So there you go.
Thank you.
You bet. Anytime.
Oh my gosh, this is cool. Mm-hmm. Thanks for letting me just like give this a go.
There you go.
Yeah.
I get to, get on the couch.
Couch talks. Oh my goodness. Woo! Holy smoke. Oh my gosh, is it really 2:45?
Yep.
No way.
Time flies. You might want to punch that record button.